2.
Today we want to continue the story about the cargo cult movements after the war in Papua-New Guinea, in Hube. A fortnight ago, I told you the story about Gando, the prisoner of war, as he became the inspiring prophet for these movements. Today, I'll tell you about the so-called army cult. While our missionaries were interned in Australia during the years of the war and afterwards in the 40s, the cargo cult were able to spread unnoticed and undistributed. No one could be questioned, consulted, or intervene in any advisory or corrective capacity. Gando himself had retreated already to Wau among the gold miners. Meanwhile, other influential Bulum leaders, Zongebingehe, which means with significant name stories, had also drawn their conclusions from the events of their experiences of the war. The enormous power and the endless supply of the white soldiers had demonstrated to them their inferiority and insignificance. Gando, the medium from Original, had inspired them to dream about things to better their felt misery. So they started to search for ways and methods to find a solution, the so-called Gutbala Sin Down, a comfortable life free from annoying care. The story sounds as fantastic as tragical. It happened in the mid-year 1946. Adherents from Ko village, Boteteng from Simbeng hamlet near Sagido, and Ipongi from Jebedzang, all from the Bulum Valey, this blue area here. They professed to have gained their insights from their ancestral spirits in the seclusion of the on the foot of the mighty Mount Sarawaget here. The people living around the Sarawaget Massif, including the Hubes southeast at Tobo and the Kombas on the Kabum side, regarded this mountain as the seat of their ancestors. These ancestors have not simply died and do not exist anymore, but they continue to act from there as spirits and influence the lives of their living descendants, both positively and negatively. A quote, Sarawaget mangfunko hua boari erderdong I bofuamben, means, at the foot of Mount Sarawaget, we received the following message under mysteriously painful circumstances. Anutu has given mankind the paradise Eden. It was taken away from us because of the transgressions of Adam and Eve. But the white people have found Eden again with the help of their ancestor spirits. Our Eden is also ready, waiting for us, if we only can persuade our ancestors to open the door to the hidden inheritance for us with an appropriate conduct and a certain pleasing behavior. When Jesus rose from dead and ascended to heaven, he opened the doors on earth as well as for life everlasting to come. But the white people, including the missionaries, have locked the doors again for the good life on earth. They hide this truth from us by all means. So too, someone of our ancestors must return to lead us away through the door to a fulfilled life on earth. It is not clear here, but it seems that Jesus is understood to be a kind of an ancestral spirit for the whites only or for all mankind. Anyway, so much the revelation of the Theravada. Since the Hube people had never seen the white soldiers work in any other way than military drill, marching, standing post, and practicing combat, this had to be the key to success. Consequently, their eligible young men were drafted and militarily organized in units and drilled. Instead of real guns, they were armed with a carbine, which means a strong stick made of rattan palm. After public devotion, the units had to march and to exercise hard for several hours every day on a separate combat area. During military service time, no sexual conduct was allowed, not even with your married wife. Of course, it was not only discipline that was emphasized, but also Christian rules had to be followed. Obeying the 10 Commandments became obligatory. They had to observe strictly orders. Leisure time was precisely regulated. If someone wants to leave the village or the military compound, they need permission. Even with officially issued orders, one had to properly sign out and in again. The leaders alone made decisions and issued instructions or orders. Anyone who was guilty of the slightest offense was no longer allowed to join the drill, attend meetings and devotions. Even no food was served without prayer. In general, there was a lot of prayer, privately in the homes and families, as well as during activities and of course at public meetings and assemblies. The Christian conduct. The public devotions were considered particularly important. The units had to line up for roll call every morning at 7 and in the afternoon at 3 o'clock. Then they marched to the church and circled it 3 times. At the entrance, they would respectfully stop and salute up to the cross. A guide opened the door. Only then they entered the interior, followed by the parishioners. The village as a whole, especially the inhabitants, made an effort to appear clean and tidy at all times and occasions. The whole community had to strictly follow Christian rules and values. So quite a few observers, including critical minds, often considered this to be a sincere, genuine Christian revival movement. A certain charismatic and moral enthusiasm was certainly evident in the meetings, devotions, and services. The sermon content dealt mainly with visions of the Old Testament or the revelations of the New Testament, or with moral consequences of the commandments. Prayer communities had a strong effect and lasted for a long time. There was also much and fervent singing. Ecstatic individuals were sometimes visibly moved physically, so-called sahakpiring, ecstatic paroxysms. Cases of speaking in tongues are also reported. They called it nameng herisye. Though nobody could understand them, nor could they explain that or translate what was said. But undoubtedly, this had an impressive effect on many participants and witnesses. For many, sincere gratitude also played a decisive role. The fact that the war, with all its turmoil and dangers, had been survived well, that almost all of the men, sons, and relatives had returned unharmed, was perceived as a concrete help from God. This in turn provided additional motivation, which was readily received by the leaders of the movement. After all, unity within the community is always considered a very important element for every successful life and any successful undertaking. That is the power which makes things work. But the elements and influences from the old cultural religion called animism are increasingly coming to the fore and determining the practices and development of the movement. Rietbiko at the lake, the ancestral spirits will provide the converted goats. For the lakes have always been considered taboo zones, being doors to the realm of the dead, where the deceased have retreated and through which they pass back and forth to communicate with the living, either threaten them or assist them. That is why 2 buildings made of bush material are now being erected at the shore of the lake. One on post, in which the men hold their meetings and consultations. A little apart from this, a larger hut directly set on the ground, in which everything is prepared for the reception of the grants. A separate pit is dug into it, into which a crudely carpeted table is planted. Here the monetary donations and other offerings to the ancestors are deposited. From now on, festivals in honor of the ancestors are celebrated regularly to invoke their help. Every time a large pig is slaughtered, some of its blood is emptied into the water of the lake and some into the pit of the ancestor's hut. The meat then is cooked and eaten with plenty of taro and leafy vegetables in the traditional way as mumu, that is, food cooked on heated stones in a ground hall. But only men have a share in it. Women and children are not allowed, like in the traditional Ngosa ceremony. They would have dared anyway, out of fear. During these festivity times, men have abstained liquor and any other alcoholic drinks. Sexual intercourse is strictly forbidden because it would inevitably destroy the transfer power. Afterwards, there is drumming and dancing all night long. Several cult centers with local sub-leaders gradually emerge in other parts of the Bulum Valey. The 3 leading prophets, as they are often called now, go from festival to festival in turn. In between, they live in the seclusion of Mount Sarawaget in lonely forest huts to receive further inspiration and instructions through dreams and apparitions. So much for today.